Hi, this is Chris from Clever Unicorn Games and the Unicorn Collective, back with another one of our interviews with designers. Today I have Aaron Gall with me. He is a designer, he is an English teacher, he is a musician, and he is probably the furthest away of any of the designers I've interviewed so far, living in South Korea at about 8,000 miles. So there is that. Hi, Aaron, how are you doing today?
Hey Chris, doing great. Thank you.
So, if you weren't designing and playing games, what would you be doing with your spare time? What is it you enjoy to do?
The thing I enjoy to do most in my spare time is play music and write music. I went to college for uh, music, performance, and education, and I've been writing songs since I was a teenager, whether it was like for rock bands or uh, the bands that were the band I was in, and my brother always said like the music you write sounds like soundtrack music. And when I was in uh, college, I was selected to do. We had a Batman animation group project from the animation and the drama group, and the musicians had a group project together, and I wrote a Batman soundtrack at that time. So music's my first passion. So
Nice.
yeah.
No, back to games. What would you say is your favorite game? What would you play over anything else if somebody suggested it?
Um, when I was growing up, I had a real affinity for Stratego.
Yeah,
And
classic.
yeah, for some reason, even though there's a lot of luck in that game, it is Stratego. There's a lot of strategy. So when I played that with my friends and family at home, I was often the winner, unbeatable. So that game has a special place in my heart. And the copy I had was the Lord of the Rings version. I never played. They had some way that you could play like a Lord of the Rings battle, but yeah, I wish that's gone. I think I have to like buy it on eBay for some extra dollars now. If I still had it, it might be nice.
What would you
Loving Lord of the Rings, and we go, yeah,
Yeah, that does sound interesting. That's one that I've never played. I've never played Stratego. So it's probably one that I should. Same with Axis and Allies. People say Axis and Allies is one of those classics, and I've still yet to play it. So I probably need to get Stratego and Axis and Allies and give them a go.
yeah. And Stratego, it's one of those games where let me look at the games behind me. I mean, that's like a real cult. Yeah, these games are good. But Stratego is one of those games where you really couldn't change it in any way to like make it better. Like if you wanted to change it, well, you you could do some things to make it more interesting, but as it is, it's like it's totally complete. There's nothing more you can add or should take away from it. So I like
That's we can
that.
tell. I can tell that that one's really made you think as well. That's yeah
Mhm.
to think, and it's brought you back to a memory of youth, which is again a great thing about board games is you can do this. You can look back to your youth when you played these, and it brings up great memories.
Yeah.
When you come to designing a game like Dimentals, where do you start? What inspires you to make that game? Take it from your brain and then start making it.
Yeah. Okay. The first thing we thought about actually was like we had our like these days there are so many games on the market, right? So if if you want a game to reach people, you need some kind of gimmick. So our Dimentals really started with the fact Ethan and I had this special printing process to have a ink that you can't really see, that it's only seen with the black light. So we started with the fact we wanted to make a game using that special full spec. So then, if you have something with the black light, then the next thing came developing really a story to go along with it. And that story came to be Dimentals, invisible creatures to go along with the you know, unseeable ink. And then from there, uh, then we got into the mechanics. So maybe in some sense the game was written in a, made a little bit backwards, right? And instead of just starting with a game mechanic that we wanted to use, it really started with production and story, and then the mechanics kind of, what can we do with this? Like, uh, one of the mechanics in the game that I think is one of the cool mechanics came from a suggestion from my friend, which was we have cards that look the same, but when the light turns on, they each have a different ability. So putting mechanics that work with that in the game um, was what happened naturally as the game was being made. Yeah. So, sorry to wrap up that question. Is we started backwards with story.
That's
With
that you'd be
with story.
surprised actually from the designers that I've interviewed so far that it's not none of them really have the same approach to this. You know, they've all had games where they've
Mm-hmm.
done it a different way. So it's interesting to see, which is why the question's in here, is just how different designers approach it. And so far, like I say, everyone's been slightly different. If you were to make another game, so if, say, I'm sure, do you have another game in your head that you think you want to bring out as well?
Um. Well, my coworkers, my partners, they have some good game ideas that once we have Dimentals launched, we're we're ready to go with their ideas.
So
Um,
how do you think you're
uh,
going to approach a game next, do you say? So next time maybe there isn't the blacklight and the production issue. With your next game, what do you think you would do to approach one, say that, or even if you were helping one of your friends to design one, where do you think you'd go in on the next one? Where would you start off?
um, well, when someone like has a game idea for me, what I really want from like one of my friends pitches me their idea, what I really want them to do is have a prototype. Because just like learning a game, like when you like first pull out a board game, like, hey, you guys want to play like Epic Galaxies? And then like someone's like, well, how do you play it? And then you go, la da 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 da, and then you're like, just let's just play, right? So
So
when
what?
someone
Yeah,
has like a game idea,
you want somebody,
like
you want them to come up with it,
I
and then you
want
just
them
want to help them
to,
play test.
yeah, I want them to at least have a play. Well, if they have like an interesting story and like an idea, I'm like, oh, okay. But to really see if that works, like have a prototype, go onto a Word document or PowerPoint or wherever you're good at and print out the cards you need and get the pieces you need and, bring something we can work with. And then we can go, oh, this can have potential because, once you have a prototype, the game changes a lot from that point. So just having the idea and talking about it like with my partners, it's not enough. You got to like put that game through a lot of playtesting, right?
Yep, yep,
So,
you are right. So far, you're close to being ready to launch your game.
mhm.
Up until now, through the process, have there been any issues and things that have happened, and how have you overcome those issues?
Oh man, there's been numerous issues and
Think of the worst.
overtime. Yeah, the worst. I don't know if I want to share the worst. I think
The worst that isn't
okay. Well, here's,
inflammatory to anyone.
yeah, yeah. Let me. I got one. I got one. So, um, we're launching on Kickstarter soon here, and we were ready sooner, but we wanted to have our product be as successful as possible. So, initially in our game, we have some, which we still have. We have like a starship and a home base, and they have some, hit point value. And to be kind of low cost production, I designed it with just having some sliders, so we can just order some sliders and print the cards. But we wanted more successful project. So um, my my partner and boss Ethan's like, let's do recessed boards. So introducing that element, going from how having it being designed with sliders, and then totally changing into recessed boards, that adds like a long time. That's not like a quick change. Like when you want something like that, I would, if anyone's out there making a board game, like decide what you want early on for your pieces. Because if you go from thinking you want to use sliders to recess boards, it totally changes production. It changes what the graphic designer has to put together. It changes how you have to print the game and get the game cut. So many things. So
Completely agree with that
no,
one. Yeah. I've done it myself. We've had boards that literally well, it wasn't so much sliders, but they had counters sitting on them. And then because,
mhm.
everybody loves your dual layer boards with the recesses for putting your counters into,
Yeah,
we
they
yeah,
love it.
I had to redesign the boards, and then we 3D printed some prototypes and stuff. Yeah, it does add a huge amount of time. But they do look cool.
Exactly. They do look fantastic. So if you want that, why not put the extra month in and put the extra time in? Because in the end, you got something that's way cooler. But even here's something interesting. So does with the sliders for our game, we have a starship and a home base. So with the sliders, they were two separate pieces. And maybe perhaps you remember at Spiel, if you remember what our game looked like, we had those two separate pieces, which is sliders. Once we decided to do recess boards, uh, I came up with the idea to have the starship in the center of the board, and then when the HP goes down to 0, it gets taken out, and then the home base is revealed underneath, and the starship's discarded. So instead of there being two boards with sliders, now one. So, you make a change like that, and then it adds some new potential in what you do to the game and making it more compact and different.
Have you played a game that you really did not like? Now, you don't have to name it, but what were the mechanics, or was it the theme, or what was it about that game you didn't like that really put you off it?
Right. Oh, sure. There must be some games. Let me look behind me. Get some inspiration. Uh, let me see.
I would
I
expect the ones
suppose.
in your collection
I,
probably aren't
I
the ones,
suppose.
but
Yeah, but people give you some games here and there, presents. So, um, I was gonna point out I have a don't. It's called Don't Step in It, but it's for my kids. It's like a doggy doo doo. I don't care for that. No, I'm just kidding around. So, yeah. Uh, maybe you'll have to edit how long I think about this now because I don't want to step on anything.
that's what I mean. You don't
But
have to
I
name
do
it.
want
Don't
to.
name it. Just say what was the thing about the game. So just pick one, and what was the thing about that game that you didn't like?
I'm gonna go like this so that you can like just cut out and I'll pop right back. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I can't think of a specific off the top of my head, but when a game is too lucky, I don't like that because then I don't get my antsy. Like I like that feeling when you're playing a game where you're like, oh, this could go either way, but I'm so close to winning, and if my strategy works, yes, yes, that feeling,
Do know
right?
that? Yep, yep.
But yeah, if a game just really has a lot of luck, then I'm kind of taken out of it. Like, oh, well, I know it's gonna just be up to the roll of the dice, so it's not within my. It's really, and if a game has too much of that, um, then I'm taken out of the game and I don't get connected or feel like my strategy's worth it or anything like that. So,
No, I think you're spot on there. It's one of those things where, I mean, if it's a shorter game, then that's not too bad. But if it's a
mhm.
long game and there's serious decisions that are decided by dice, that for me is something, because you're building your strategy and you're doing what you can to have it taken away from you by the roll of a dice. To me, a little bit frustrating.
Oh yeah.
Um,
So that's what I go with.
How, as now being in South Korea, you've actually dealt with the pandemic pretty well over there. In fact, like we were speaking about earlier, the poster child for how to deal with something like this. But how has it affected the way that you've been working on the game?
Um, well, the biggest way it's affected working on the game is that our graphic designer has secluded her
Oh, you just broke up there. You
until
just broke up. What'd you say?
I said our graphic designer has secluded herself away in her home. So I used to. She has a cat a cafe. So right around winter time, Christmas time, I was able to like if there's a little change, I'd drive over to a cafe, sit down next to the computer, and be like, da, 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 da. But now that the since once the virus hit, she's like, closing my cafe. I'm going home. She took her computer home, so I couldn't like invite myself into her home and be like, "No." And also like early on in the pandemic, I wouldn't want to because I don't know, we didn't know who's sick or not at that time. In Korea was the worst place in the beginning. Um, that's another way it affected the game. In the beginning, was quite worrisome. Oh, we're in South Korea and everyone's gonna. We were anti-poster child. We're doing everything wrong. They're coming in. One of our cities, Daegu, had like a mega church just totally spread the virus in that city. So at first it was a bit scary. We thought like the virus just canceled.
Yep, it is. It,
But
it
yeah,
was very worrying. I mean, things are. I don't want to jinx it by saying things are kind of getting better everywhere at the moment, but it does seem to be getting more under control right now. I mean, things are looking brighter. I mean, probably not for this year, but I think going into next year we might be in a better place, hopefully, especially as board game designers and publishers, you know. Hopefully.
yeah,
So what are you? Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
Not
you're
wrong.
working on. You still. Well, I'm going to say what are you working on right now, but we know you were still getting Dimentals ready to take it to market.
Mm-hmm.
Anything
Oh,
else that you think's in the pipeline?
in the pipeline from me or from
Yeah,
our
yeah.
company
Are you
because we
thinking
got both.
maybe you will? I mean, you said that you're probably going to help friends design games, but have you got something maybe in your head? If this does well, so say Dimentals does really well, um, it all works out, would you then say, well, if that's worked, let's move on to another game?
Yeah. I have for Dimentals, and I kind of did the George Lucas thing, so I'll just. It's actually Dimentals Act One. All right. So there's gonna be three acts. So in I guess I can't go into them, and we're just gonna have to wait and see like if the game gets successful. But I have plans for um first we have plans for an expansion because we made a, a game with two factions. You can play with the two factions as four players, but next I would like the expansion with three two other factions. So three to you can play with 3 to 4 players with each person using a different faction. And I after that expansion, I want to introduce Dimentals Part Two, where the mechanics are changed a little bit, and the resource, what you draw from the resources, is changed, and the Dimentals have different effects. And then finally, I want to make a Part Three.
A
So
trilogy.
Dimentals, yeah, Dimentals is in the pipeline for as long as it remains successful and the team I'm working with is likes my ideas and wants to move forward with my game, right? Or not my game, but our game. That concept. Um, so yeah, that's what I would say. And uh, any other games than that, I've just been focusing on that and looking forward to that. After we launch, uh, having Dimentals hopefully get us up and running, and then the games from my partners up and running and successful, then continuing Dimentals down the road over the next 3 to 5 years.
And that's a good answer in that yes, sometimes when you're making one of these things, it's okay to have this grand idea of a you know a shared sort of universe like they do a lot with movies these days. I'm having this whole story written in because a lot of people really like theme. You know, the theme and the story behind the game can sell a game, especially if you've got plans down the line.
Yeah.
Um, what would you, so from what you've done so far up until now, what if somebody was thinking of making a game, so if they were going, if they have it in their mind and they're thinking, I'm going to take this to the next stage, what advice would you give to a designer going into making a game?
Okay, well, my first advice is kind of repeating what I said before is make your prototype and get people to play it and play test it. I remember my first, uh, the first prototype of Dimentals I made, and it's quite, I mean, it's there. What Dimentals became is there, but it's quite different. Like, I would say the original Dimentals was more like a tabletop board game. There were still some characters and some cards, but much more like a game like I have behind me, like Betrayal at House on the Hill has some characters, or Forbidden Desert has some characters. It was kind of like a limited number of characters, but that became your. It started as that, and now Dimentals has a complete faction of cards. And collecting resources was more like rolling dice and going to certain, different parts of the board to get your resources to having a resource deck. So the two games are almost not even this. They're very similar, but not the same game because one's a tabletop and one's a card game, essentially. So you got to make your prototype and play it because the game could take any direction.
Brilliant.
And of course, I would say because of our gimmick with the ink, taking the game from a tabletop to a card game was the better idea because we have this printing capability that allows you to have these different images and different artworks and different mechanics with like abilities on separate cards that you can't really see. So
No, I
it
will. I
just
will
makes
add.
sense
I
to go.
will add to that. That yeah, seeing it at Essen, I mean, it was breathtaking the amount of detail. Because up until now, when you say UV glow in the dark ink, you think like splodgy patterns and things and big thick lines. You don't realize that you can get so much detail and even different colors into what shows up when you shine that black light onto the cards themselves. They were truly breathtaking in what they showed you after you shine that light on them.
Yeah, it's that's why I can't wait to launch because looking forward to my our expansions. Like I want to see more artwork again. We've been we were hoping to launch like a couple months ago, so now it's like, oh yeah, we have these beautiful cards and beautiful artworks, but I've been looking at that for half a year or longer, working with the artists, so see what we can do next. We have a successful Kickstarter, pay our artists a little more, they can spend a little more time on, we can get maybe they have some different ideas once they see this is first time doing this double printing with this kind of UV light ink. So um, I think once artists see these cards, they'll have new, fresh ideas. Because when I initially was contacting artists, I made a PPT that said like we got this like way we're gonna print, and make you have to make two different artworks, and they're gonna be printed on the same card, and all this kind of stuff. So um, I don't think if I could design that PowerPoint again after seeing the cards, I could have a few more details added so they could have a better product. So not like my words are
No, no,
not a
no. I
necessary thing,
understand 100%.
but
The cards
taking
are
it to
already
the
beautiful, but you know now more so that when the future ones come out, they'll be even better.
that's what I'm saying.
Well,
Thank you, Chris.
thank you very much for coming and talking to me today, Aaron. This has been a pleasure. Uh,